Fantastic. Welcome, everybody. It looks like we've got about 38 people, and we're expecting probably about 20 more. So we're expecting about almost 60 people in the room here with us today, and we're very glad that you're here for Aparra's first virtual CIO Insights. We're very pleased that you're taking the time to be here. As you know, this is part of our fundraising. This is part of our bringing networks together and bringing people together for gathering and learning with one another, and it also is what powers our mission to lift nonprofits in the community. So we are very grateful that you're here. We know this is a challenging time, that things are different, and that we would love to have you in the room so that we could shake your hands and say hello, but we are very grateful that you're here with us anyway to hear this insight. I am very excited about this conversation today, Winning on the Curve, Lessons Learned from COVID-19, and we have some outstanding presenters with us who will be introduced in just a moment. So can't say enough about myself listening to what you gentlemen, happens to be gentlemen to this time, have to share with us. I'm looking forward to it. I would be remiss if I didn't thank our sponsors for making this event possible, for staying with us. We were supposed to have this in person in May, and you stayed with us now through 2 date changes and finally to virtual, and we are grateful for that. CapTech and NTT, Dimension Data. We're very grateful. David Boatman, I believe you are on the line, and we're going to ask you to say a couple of words on behalf of NTT. Let me see if I can find you and allow you to speak. Well, I don't know that I can. How's that?
It doesn't look like he's in yet, unless the phone in.
Well, maybe we'll let him speak at the end then, as people leave. And if he does come in, just let me know. We can let him speak. We're very grateful for these companies. Dimension Data and NTT has been sponsoring the entire year. So this is almost the last one. Our last one is got moved from March into July, and that will be another conversation with a different group of CIOs, also looking at some of the innovations that have happened during this time in COVID-19. So we look forward to that. Please come back and join us for that. Today, we would love for you to social media post, even though we're not in person. If you hear something that's terrific, please note our social media post is #Aparra Insights. Please shout it out there, shout out companies that are part of this conversation, and you can always also do it at Aparra CLT in Facebook and LinkedIn. And before we get into the topic today, I want to just share one exciting piece of information. We are announcing the Tech Exec Community Impact Award. The nominations have opened for this award, and the deadline is August 11th. The nomination process is very easy. You don't have to do a lot of information. There is an application that the nominee will fill out later. The point of this award is to celebrate people who are leading teams in the technology space, not just CIOs, though it can be CIOs, but people who aren't just CIOs, who are doing amazing philanthropic work in our community. And people have asked us, is this an Aparra award for people who are sponsoring Aparra only or on the Aparra board? No, it is not at all. It is not even just about doing Aparra related work. We love if you're doing Aparra related work, but this is about people in the tech space who are doing great philanthropy in our community in a lot of different ways, through talent, treasure, and time in the community. So it does not have to be Aparra work that you're involved with. If you know somebody who's doing great work and really lifting people in our community through their work and their teams and their company, please feel free to nominate them. And Adrian, I'm just going to do a little shout out that David Boatman does not have the link for tonight, if you would make sure he has it. And with that, I'm going to introduce you to last year's Tech Exec winner.
Hi, my name is Courtney Ramey, and I lead the Charlotte office for JBN Consulting. I am truly honored.
That didn't work because I turned off my mic. So
hi, my name is Courtney Ramey, and I lead the Charlotte office for JBN Consulting. I am truly honored to be the 2019 recipient of the Aparra Tech Exec Community Impact Award. A major benefit of this award was getting to select a nonprofit to receive $5,000 of pro bono support. It was a hard choice, but I was thrilled to select the Project Life Movement, a nonprofit that establishes bone marrow drives on college campuses. This cause is near and dear to my heart because my husband, John, received a bone marrow transplant that saved his life 30 years ago. Thanks to Aparra, the Project Life Movement staff is going through Office 365 training. The skills they learn will help them work faster and smarter so they can focus more on mission direct work. Now, I'm pleased to announce that the nominations are open for the 2020 Tech Exec Community Impact Award. Please take a few minutes to nominate a philanthropically minded tech exec in your network today.
And with that, I'm going to turn this over, and here is a QR code that you can take a picture of if you want to nominate somebody. And I want to introduce David Boatman from NTT to say a few words of welcome before we get started with today's session.
Kim, can you hear me?
Sure can. Speak up a little louder, but we can hear you.
All right, thank you. If I move the microphone closer. So my name is David Boatman with NTT Limited, and I want to thank you for the opportunity for us to sponsor tonight. NTT is a global company with about 100 billion in revenues. We do about 3.6 billion in continued R&D per year to improve our cybersecurity solutions that we bring to the marketplace. We focus on healthcare, financial services, manufacturing, and retail. We are truly proud to be part of this event, as well as Aparra, and to sponsor many of these this year, as well as the philanthropic services that Aparra delivers to the community. The last thing I would say about NTT is we're large enough to deliver globally, small enough to care locally. And Kim, with that, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you for the opportunity today.
And we love that you care locally and you show it. It's a true statement. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful facilitator, Vinnie Schoenfelder, who is the principal and CTO at CapTech, today's sponsor.
Great, thank you, Kim. I appreciate that. And thanks to Aparra for having us host this event. CapTech really values this partnership. It aligns really well with one of our core values, which is being a servant leader, not only to our clients, but also in the communities we serve. And Aparra's mission of providing technical expertise to the nonprofits that require it is a really strong match with who we are and the kind of work that we do. For those of you who don't know CapTech, we're a national consulting firm. We partner with clients to deliver, meaningful value to employees and their clients as well. So that, think of things like mobile, web, voice, natural language processing, wearables, IoT, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and of course, all the enterprise integration and services necessary to make that work in complicated Fortune 500 environments. We also do a lot of work in the program and project management side, as well as customer experience and interactive design. And my role as CTO, for us, it's an externally facing role. So I don't do anything with our internal systems. I'm always looking outside, focusing on helping companies with strategy, innovation and ideation, and enterprise and application architecture. Big thanks to everyone joining us. I know, myself included, we all have Zoom fatigue, right, or WebEx fatigue. And so coming out and supporting Aparra in this way is meaningful. I agree with you, Kim. I really was looking forward to have everyone in the Charlotte office. But obviously, this is the most responsible way we can proceed. And I'm sure we'll step on each other a little bit, but we'll do the best to keep it as smooth as we can. For those listening, please be as interactive as possible. We have a chat window going. We're not in person, but let's do the best we can to make this as interactive as possible. To help set the stage, and then we'll do some introductions and winning on the curve. I like to think of an automotive analogy here, and I've been thinking about this for more than a decade. At full speed down the straightaway, it's hard to overtake somebody, right? It's hard to get past your competitors, gain market share, form deeper relationships with your employees and customers. It's hard to differentiate. And so people are always looking for disruptors, right? Disruptors are in this analogy, the corners that come up. And boy, was COVID-19 a major curve that people did not see coming. But the organizations that can outmaneuver, come out faster out of those corners. So they're the ones that are going to gain market share, have more meaningful relationships with their clients and their employees. So what we're talking about today is really two sides to this. One is, what are the things that these organizations have done prior to this? You didn't know this was coming, but you knew something was going to come, right? The straightaways don't last forever, curves come. So what did people do in terms of empowering their employees, having better methodologies, better architecture, so that they were flexible should something unforeseen happen? And then really in the more practical sense, since this has been happening, how have these companies reacted in real time to benefit their customers and benefit their employees, and what's working and what's not working? So that's really kind of the high level outline of what we're discussing today. I have a great panel. I'm gonna let them introduce themselves. We'll go in order of the slide here, Arvy, Mike, and Eric. So Arvy, why don't you kick us off?
Good afternoon, everyone. Arvy Rajasekaran, CIO, Enterprise Architecture at Ally Bank. Been at Ally for about 11 years, and I'm looking forward to this conversation today.
Great. Welcome, everyone. Thanks first to Aparra for hosting this and our sponsors, and those of you that I'm sure have been on Zoom meetings all day and have one last Zoom meeting for the day. So my name is Mike Laurenti. I'm the CIO for what we call our Global Support Office at Ahold Delhaize. You may not know the name Ahold Delhaize as much as you know some of our brands like Food Lion. We are an international food retailer with over 400,000 employees in 11 countries with 6,500 stores. And I'm one of multiple CIOs in the organization. We have CIOs that run those local brands, and I'm responsible for our kind of corporate support solutions that we have. So if you have a problem in your local Food Lion, you can call one of the other CIOs. I'm just kidding. I'd be happy to help. But I'm happy to talk today about what we're doing at the Global Support Office to support our organization.
Eric, you're on mute.
Good afternoon, and glad to see that you guys are here and interested in this topic. We think is a pretty meaningful topic. My name is Eric Christian. I'm Vice President, Chief Technology Officer for Atrium Health. We are a healthcare system of about 55 hospitals in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. We also have about 52 urgent cares, 59 freestanding emergency departments, and a pretty large healthcare system, the largest in the state of North Carolina.
Great, thank you. We talked about sort of what organizations did pre-event and whether they're doing post-event. That's one dimension. The other dimension is how this is affecting and how you're responding to your employee base versus how you're reacting and responding to your client base. So this first question you can take it either way, either employee base or client base, or a little from column A, a little from column B. But I'd like to hear from you guys, perhaps in the same order, what your initial response was to approaching this pandemic situation. Has it been consistent? And what were your sort of your early insights and aha moments starting this? So
I'll start, thanks, Vinnie. So speaking first to the associate base, I wrote the date down. It was March 5th. It was the first day that we all started working from home for Ally. And, just leading up to that date, there was just a lot of conversation. We were all watching the news. The leadership team was very engaged in kind of figuring out what the response needed to be. But I think one of the keys to success for Ally was the rapid response. On that Thursday, the 5th of March, we decided to test out our systems and just have everybody work from home for a day and see what the kinks are in the system and how best everything works. We did find some kinks. We'll talk about that later, but things escalated pretty quickly beyond that. And we decided to extend that to the Friday and see how things happened through the weekend. And we never went back to work after that. It's been, so we're about 105 days into the situation now. The number one priority for the whole EC, the Executive Council, was making sure that our associates were healthy and safe and able to contribute and work through this pandemic. And I think the response has been very solid, and we'll talk more about this. It also gave the technology group a great opportunity to kind of step up and be a hero. And I've been talking to a lot of different peers across the industry, And it's been a very consistent story of how IT saved the day.
Thanks, Arvy. Yeah, one of the things I've noticed with my clients is there was a varying level of certainty or uncertainty in their team's ability to work remotely. Some were already doing it, and some would say they could never do it. We can't support that here. Our model doesn't work that way. And yet we were forced into that environment. And most everyone I'm talking to is having really great success, with this remote model. Mike, I'll turn it to you then. Was that your experience as well? How prepared were you for this model, and what did you do to make it successful?
Yeah, so overall, I think we were pretty prepared for what was to come. So being a food retailer and being deemed an essential business, I think this was somewhat similar to a hurricane or other sorts of disasters that we often have to mobilize around, and many other retailers close during these sorts of incidents, and we have to manage through and manage both caring for our associates and our customers. So I think it was, we put our kind of rapid response into place quite quickly. I think obviously what's different in this case is the length of time to which usually a hurricane lasts, X number of days and weeks, and we get back to normal at a certain point in time. So I think the team reacted quickly, but I think the duration became the challenge of how long certain systems had to operate under different stress levels. As many of you saw, right, there were food shortages, let's say, or bulk buying during this period of time. And so many of our systems, for example, actually had controls in them that were intended to be smart controls to not allow certain large purchases of things, thinking it could be an error, but in fact, they were real purchases because of the volume of sales that we were doing in the early days. So I think that, one of our values as a company is care. And we really balanced, let's say, the care of our associates, realizing that they needed to be safe and they needed to work from home. But we needed to maintain the business. We needed to maintain the food supply. And then there's, of course, care for our customers, right? Very much focused on safety in our stores and sanitation in our stores. And so I think the team really responded quickly, and fortunately, because of the experiences we've had around other natural disasters and things similar, let's say, in at least initial feeling, that really helped us through this. Gotcha.
Eric, I'm going to be a little bit more specific with you. I think this is a really interesting question from a healthcare perspective. There are some changes, right? Like telemedicine in terms of the doctors I've had to see for my children and whatever since COVID have been virtual, and we love it. And I wish I could do this all the time. It's much better to wait the 30 or 40 minutes, before you go in the comfort of your own home, especially with a special needs child, than it is to be in a waiting room. So for you are dealing with two sides of that. There's a change aspect to the patients and their willingness to do that, but there's also the aspect of the physicians and their belief or ability that that's going to be an effective way to connect with their patients. So you're getting it from both sides. Have you seen the adoption from both of those groups, and how is that evolving? And is it going to go back to normal at some point, or are people going to stay in this one?
Well, we often in healthcare make reference to the fact that there's no normal. The days of normal are really past. I'd say that this epidemic has certainly changed the landscape of how healthcare is delivered. Probably in one of the most pivotal ways is that we've actually been pushing video visits. We actually have a number of video-related capabilities that allow doctors to have appointments, for there to be behavioral health assessments, for example. And we've actually been on a kind of a slow growth trajectory as telehealth matures. The technologies that enable it are extended. And that's actually, we've actually had relatively slow growth over the last number of years, where in this last 90 days, there's been an explosion pretty much, right? Where we've shifted, the world has kind of shifted in that many of those services and kind of our heritage of how we deliver healthcare has typically been a brick and mortar. And by brick and mortar, I really mean even many of our teammates worked at physical locations. And that has been the norm throughout the history of Atrium Health. And that entire philosophy has changed in that we've enabled remote work We've enabled non-essential capabilities to be handled remotely. So things like call centers, for example, our call centers, that was a function that we never believed, or some people never believed we'd be able to actually extend out to people's homes, and technology actually enables that to happen, right? So I'd say that not only are the physicians finding a very meaningful experience, not to mention being able to spend more quality time with their patients, because if you can imagine an office setting where they're kind of moving from room to room, you know, the video visit is actually much more straightforward, in many cases as effective, if not more effective. And I guess the one other part that I guess I would add to that is that we also are able to leverage knowledge and skill bases much more broadly. So for example, we have specialists, for example, that we can call in for consults. We consult rural areas, for example, that have minimal specialty areas would be another example, right? So just leveraging fully this telehealth capability has actually been very beneficial, both to the patient as well as our physicians are embracing it very well as well.
Real quick follow-up question on that. You know, one of the things I've been talking about is that there are different groups that have resisted a digital transformation, and you know, Arvy, I'd be curious about this from a banking perspective as well, and Mike, kind of from a B2B perspective. People who have been resisting change, right? There are people who still don't want to use Amazon Prime, they still didn't want to do Netflix, and they've been forced into this model, and most like it. So it's not about weathering the storm, because we're not going to go back fully, even if there's a cure tomorrow, right? Attitudes that have changed in large bases of people. So when you say there was the transition to telemedicine was really slow until this happened, was it slow because patients didn't want to adopt it, or was it slow because physicians didn't want to adopt it? Where was which group, physicians or the patients, were more reluctant to switch to a telemedicine model?
Well, I think it was probably more of a generational thing, in that our younger patients, they would have it no other way. So, I mean, if you looked at the millennials, if you looked at the latter half of the baby boomers, they were pretty inclined to go the virtual path, where our more senior individuals didn't like the idea at all, actually. Mm-hmm. Now our physicians, I'd say they were kind of mixed as well, in that we have implemented an EMR solution. We use Cerner for our clinical capabilities, and we use Epic as our revenue cycle systems. And the doctors have become very familiar with those systems. In order for them to learn the virtual delivery of that capability, it involved them learning new skills, changing their workflows to accommodate a virtual context. If you think about having to facilitate prescriptions, for example, or facilitate a lab being taken, and a patient having to go to a lab and have blood drawn, as an example. Those are things that docs have had to learn the workflow of, but now that many of them have actually had to do that, and we've shifted so much of our population to that path, it's proven to be beneficial on both sides.
Thank you. Arvy, with banking, you know, financial services was really on the leading edge with a lot of digital transformation. Banking on the app, you know, love taking pictures of a check and being able to deposit it. But there were still groups that were resistant to that are now being introduced. I'm curious if you're seeing an uptick in people taking advantage of the digital experiences you provide. Is that growing? And as a company, are you guys looking at for even more additional ways to expand that part of your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, Ally, you know, has always been a digital-only bank. All of our services, deposits, auto finance, mortgage, investment and brokerage have all been predominantly done digitally, but we have a significant portion of our customers still contact our contact centers and operations. And especially when you think about the early days where we didn't have great coverage in the contact centers, and especially in you know, like Manila and Philippines, as well as in Romania, where we have some centers, we had certain centers being shut down. So our call wait times were pretty high in the early days. And also, this was at the same time where Ally was one of the first companies to kind of roll out waivers on overdraft fees on the bank side, and 3 months, the 3 months of reprieve on auto loans and mortgage loans. And a lot of customers were trying to call us to take advantage of those things. So if you think about the early days, there was a lot of heavy activity that was going on. One of the things we did, and kind of when we talk about winning the curve, we really used digital adoption as a key tool through that period. We built in a very rapid pace. We built a lot of new capabilities and applications to guide our customers through the journey of asking for a 3-month reprieve on auto loans or mortgage loans, asking for reprieve on overdraft fees, or etc. And handled most of that through new applications we built literally overnight in many cases to handle that volume, and also to capture some of their capabilities from email or push or SMS, so we can continue the conversation more digitally as opposed to pushing them to our contact centers. And that was one of the big things we did, which not only helped in the moment, but is going to help us significantly in winning the curve coming out of this, because now the customers have started to access these capabilities more digitally and are more susceptible to stay on the digital path, but also engage with us more on our capabilities down the road. So that was the big game changer for us.
Gotcha. Hey, Mike, before you answer, we have a question in from Bob Hody that I think relates to this. It's one challenge to keep connected remotely with your corporate family, but have you done that with your clients and their needs? So Mike, from a B2B perspective, how are you replacing that in-person connection that I know is important virtually? Are you doing that? Is that working? Are you guys starting your own phase 1, phase 2, getting back to in-person?
Yeah, we are. And I would like to come back to that question, because I think you talking about kind of digital adoption in banking, maybe on the leading edge. I think grocery has historically been a laggard in that space, but we've also seen some pretty significant changes. But as far as our B2B relationships and our experiences, right, I mean, of course, we're leveraging all of the same technologies that many of you are. We were fortunate that we had deployed O365 about a year and a half ago. We're one of the largest implementations of O365 in the world, and we had also deployed all of Microsoft Teams. And so that's really allowed collaboration, within our organization, but also with our B2B partners. And it's proven to be pretty effective. I think maybe coming back to what Eric had said, I think there are pockets of the organization that felt that remote work was challenging, and remote work was not as productive, let's say, as being in the office. And obviously you lose some aspects of culture and connectivity to your team. But I think that the new technologies that are out there today have really allowed people to be able to do that much better. Follow-up question to that. I know that some of your clients are going to have different perspectives. Sometimes just based on what part of the country they're in terms of what phase they're at. Are they bringing people back to the office or not? Do they want to prefer to be virtual or not? So are you taking a sort of an account by account or geography by geography about how you're going to engage with companies who want to be in person again? Or is all virtual? How are you handling their preferences and then your employees' own concerns about their own health? Yeah, it's different by geography, right? So even in the States, we have offices in the Carolinas here. We have offices up in the Northeast. But it's not only different by state, but it's also different by country, right? And the reentry criteria is what you kind of would expect based on the numbers that we see and based on the safety we can provide to our associates. And that's true both in our corporate offices as well as guidelines that we have in place in our stores today.
Gotcha. Thank you. So this is to the group, anyone who wants to jump in. We don't have to keep going in order. We've talked about a lot of the change you guys have been going through. Is there something fundamental? Is there a shifting of the ground, for instance, that is seismic in how this has affected you and will continue to affect you? Or has it just been a matter of tweaking communications and tweaking interactions?
So I think, again, our primary change, I would say, in healthcare has been our use of data and analytics. I think we've achieved a level of analytics that has been anticipatory in helping to assess where we are from a pandemic point of view, as far as the impact that we're having. Are the statistics, are they rising? Are they going lower? We actually have perfected some artificial intelligence uses with some of our partners, as well as machine learning to improve those algorithms. And now we actually have a very accurate algorithm actually that's tracking pretty close to what reality is, which unfortunately in North Carolina, there's still a growth trajectory. And we haven't necessarily plateaued yet, right? But I guess the good news about that, though, is that Atrium Health, as well as Novant and Caramount, have actually been very cooperative in working together to ensure that the region has the capacity that it needs. And we all three of us have really gone through extended measures. So, for example, leveraging our EDs as potential COVID wings, for example, to facilitate isolation. In some cases, we have put out into the market and into the communities mobile testing sites where people can get tested and then can be steered towards appropriate triage. And that actually has taken some of the pressure off of our urgent cares as well as our acute care facilities, right? So I would say that our workflows have actually changed quite a bit. Our capacity has expanded quite a bit. At one point, we were even partnering with UNCC. It was looking like we were going to have a capacity that would exceed all of the beds in the metropolitan area. So we were considering partnering with UNCC. We even considered the convention center as a possibility should that need have arisen. The trajectory is suggesting that we won't need that at this point, but I would say that we actually emerged pretty rapidly with ramping up that capability. Our clinical teammates stepped up in ways that, we were far more innovative than I think a lot of people kind of gave us credit for. But we were very pleased to see Atrium Health demonstrate leadership, not only here, but many of the things that many of the partnerships that we've done with, like Microsoft, for example, where we leveraged this healthcare bot that they helped us to develop. We implemented that. And as a result of that, the diagnoses, we were able to on a much more rapid basis, triage and segment teammates that, or patients that actually did have the COVID virus positive and were able to kind of get the treatment that they needed, but also eliminate people that, because of a lack of symptoms, did not need that set of services, right? So I'd say the virtual health has actually been quite a bit, but also the way that we've been able to expand and contract to support the need, I think has actually been pretty amazing.
Vinnie, I think you're on mute there.
Yeah, it notified me as soon as you told me. I want to get your thoughts on the innovation side of this, and then there's a couple of questions that have come in about return to work policy. So we'll kind of shift to that after this. But Eric, it was good to hear you say that there's a continued investment in machine learning. When we were talking earlier about outdistancing people coming out of the corners, some things sound easy to say, like buy low, sell high. Sounds really, really easy. But when the stock market's going down, it's a really hard thing to force yourself to put money into it, right? So the behavioral patterns become more difficult. Likewise, innovating in a change curve like this, it can be very difficult to get the business side to spend new dollars, to convince them that machine learning is going to be beneficial, or that voices, chatbots can be beneficial, or whatever. So are there anything on the innovation side that you guys are working on investing in or reprioritizing as a result of this?
Is that a question for me?
Actually, it's for Mike or
okay, Mike. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, I can go first. So I would say first off, our priorities really have not changed. Things have just accelerated in different areas. So for example, in contactless solutions, like contactless payment or low contact type solutions, things like being able to order some groceries online and picking them up in store, let's say. So all of these technologies, let's say, existed. There are obviously some new things that we're innovating around. But what we're seeing is a greater adoption of them, both from the customer base as well as from from a business case perspective to say these are things that the customer expects. These are things that we feel are good investments at this point. And so let's accelerate those investments to get to a better place and penetrate the market more deeply.
It's really interesting because we've shifted from a culture of high touch equals good customer service to now no touch is good customer service, right? And people are seeking those interactions. Arvy, are you seeing that in the financial side as well?
Yeah, from Vinnie, from an investments perspective, when we started the year, nobody kind of saw what was coming from a pandemic perspective. So obviously a big portion of our prioritization has pivoted to supporting our customers and our associates through this. So on the customer side, I already talked about all the different programs we're setting up to help customers through this cycle. But even on the associate side, a significant amount of our focus has been on collaboration tools. Luckily, we had a lot of things in play that helped out. We were about to pivot from WebEx to Zoom, and literally day 2 of this scenario, we decided that we could not support our existing infrastructure. We needed to move to Zoom, and that's been huge from an associate perspective. We had new VPN concentrators sitting in our data center that we were planning to upgrade in a couple of months. Day 2 of this crisis, we had to put the new concentrators in place, and that worked out beautifully for us. So in many of these cases, we found ways to accelerate things that we were already planning to do. In other cases, the priorities for the teams have completely shifted, but it's all in reaction to what's happening out there. The one other major aha for us, going back to rapid response, every company has a contingency plan, a rapid response plan for things. But for something of this scale, it obviously is, your reaction and your response is way different than for, something that might affect a particular location or a particular region. What this has really showed us is we are able to have all of our associates and contractors work from home. And this has really changed the way we think about response to emergencies, local or national going forward.
Gotcha. Switching gears a bit because we got 2 questions. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Murali, for these questions. They're both with sort of a return to work planning. Are you guys looking at technologies like automated temperature scanning at the entrance, social distancing, hoteling, potentially using the contact tracing that Apple and Google have made available in applications and making that a requirement to come back to work? How are you providing employees with a sense of security? Are you allowing their opinion as to whether or not they want to come back to work to weigh into this? Very curious how, I know that was a lot at once, but very curious how you guys are addressing and handling those issues. Mike, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So first off, it's different in different geographies. I think it's certainly not a one-size-fits-all approach, and both from a privacy perspective and a legal perspective, there are different things that we can do in certain parts of the world. But most of the things that you just mentioned are all things that are being not only planned, but also implemented at this point. I would encourage those on the call. One of the things that we have found really valuable is this is not something that people feel as very confidential. So we're even working with our competitors and getting copies of their return to work plan. And people are really willing to kind of share this information because they really see it as something that is in kind of the best interest of really the community, let's say. But all of the things that were mentioned, right? First off, of course, safety of our customers, safety of our employees is number one, and what they feel comfortable with is really kind of at the center of the conversation. But of course, there's things from everything from PPE equipment to masks to air purification systems to changing layouts in our corporate office to not allow people to be very close to one another, of course. Cubicle changes, let's say elevator changes where, rules around, can you be in an elevator with X number of people, which staircases go up, which staircases go down, air filtration systems, temperature checks. I mean, the list goes on and on. And of course, things like travel policies and even visitor policies of really knowing who's in the environment. And so based on which office we're in, we're kind of in a different phase of where we're allowing people to come back. But at this moment, it's still quite limited.
So do you have locations that are actively return to work?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, not in the United States, throughout Europe.
What is it like here in North Carolina?
Are they at the same capacity? Oh, sorry, you go ahead, Ken.
So in North Carolina, our office in North Carolina, it's really just essential people in the office. I don't know the exact number, but it's probably less than 100 people that sit in that office. And it's an office that holds over 2,000 people.
Gotcha. Arvy, same question for you.
I think Mike covered a lot of the same things that we're going through as well in terms of return to work policies. The only piece I would add is we're taking a little bit of a conservative approach in getting back to work. Luckily, we're in an industry where we can mostly work, all of us, remotely. So we're probably not going to be the first ones to return into the office. We'll be somewhere between the middle of the pack to later in the pack. And even then, we're probably going to do it in more of a phased approach as opposed to all at once.
So as of now, there's no return to work?
No.
Yeah, and to be clear, our view is that if you can work remotely, then you should work remotely. However, what we're seeing, and this maybe I saw a different question pop up about maybe things that have surprised us. One of the things that we're seeing is that from a mental health perspective, people really want to come back to the office. And so we're both looking, let's say, at this kind of criticalness of their role, and would we allow them to come back? And then secondly, kind of what is their personal situation, and do they really need to be able to be back in engaging with people from a mental health perspective?
Gotcha. Eric, anything to add, or did that pretty much cover it?
No, well, I guess the only thing that I would add is that we certainly have plans. And we at the very beginning of all of this, we took a bit of time to segment all of our essential teammates from those that are non-essential. Most of the clinical teammates were essential, and we had to set up guidelines and PPE and kind of how that was going to work in the environment. But then once that segmentation was done, we actually did pursue bringing those folks home. We had to scale our environment to be able to support that, because we typically didn't have this volume of users that actually would kind of make that transition, right? So that's probably what I would say about that.
Gotcha. This is for all of you guys. Very direct question. I know at CapTech, I'm evaluating strongly, requiring that if people do come back to the office, they enable contact tracing. We haven't made that determination. Some people are going to have an issue with that, right? So we need to weigh both sides, and we're thinking that through. Have you guys evaluated contact tracing, and are you prepared to say whether or not you're going to either strongly recommend or enforce contact tracing?
We don't have a guideline on that yet. It's something that we're evaluating, but
yeah, like Arvy,
you guys looking at it? No, we don't have a guideline on it yet. It is something we're evaluating though, but it's not mandatory at this point.
Yeah, I think it's generally the same for our organization. I will say what we've done is we've looked at kind of the hotspots, right, of what the CDC and others describe as hotspots. And so as people take vacations, if they happen to attend or to visit a hotspot, then they are required to self-quarantine for 2 weeks, and we wouldn't allow them to be back into the office until they've been gone back at home for 2 weeks.
Gotcha.
The one thing I would say is that we actually are kind of taking a fairly broad approach at, if you look at it from the reverse angle, we're looking at our function by function and kind of looking at each group to answer the question, why can't you be at home, right? Mm-hmm. So going across the spectrum, finance, accounting, the legal teams, the IT, I think there's 1,100 people in IT, for example, and there's a pretty strong case being made for 96% of them working from home, where we take up an entire building today, right? So I think it's an interesting change in that from a brick and mortar context to why not move folks home, and you got to come up with a good answer as to why not, or that's actually going to be the reality of what happens.
Yeah, I've got a follow-up to that for you guys. I've been thinking about this a lot over the past week, and it addresses questions that just came in. Thank you. from Adam and Steve on this as well, which is I think we're declaring success a little early in our remote delivery and our remote capabilities, right? We're just into this and we're like, oh yes, look, empowered teams can actually deliver. And some people weren't surprised by that, some people were. However, I can tell you from CapTech's our own perspective and some of our, most of our clients, I've seen the same thing. The best resources in those organizations are ones who have been there for several years working side by side with subject matter experts. Our best architects have learned from the best architects in our company, side by side, shoulder to shoulder, getting feedback over projects that took 6 months. It's not going to training, it's not e-learning. Those things are prerequisites and foundational. It's the craft of going through it day after day after day. So I'm not concerned about the 15-year veteran who's working remotely. He or she is going to be fine. I'm worried about the college hire, the person who's 2 or 3 years out of school, who can get to that next level, but is no longer sitting elbows and to kneecaps, with these people. So I think our declaring success is early. I also worry about their emotional health. Do they feel like they're part of an organization? Are they in the corporate culture? Is there going to be a higher risk of attrition because they're not? They could work remotely for anybody. What do they care, right? Are they part of this team? So I guess for you guys, both that employee development as well as that corporate culture, is that a long-term play for you guys? Or when you guys, we get to phase 2, hopefully we get to a vaccine, is everyone going to come back? Are we still going to your point, I think it's very, very valid, Eric, is that we may not invite everybody back. We may say this is working great remote. We want to have a lower footprint for corporate real estate. But when we do that, there's going to be these unattended side effects of culture and education and employee development. Are you guys thinking about that? Is that part of your planning? Arvy, I'll start with you. I see you nod.
Yeah, no, this is a great point. In its, I'll maybe answer it 2 ways. So we're doing more in terms of collaboration. So for example, in our Agile teams, we have some junior team members and senior team members, and we're trying to keep the collaboration going within those teams and the knowledge sharing going. But we're also in parallel. We have a whole intern batch that is coming on. That their whole intern experience is going to be virtual. This is like the first time we're doing this. So we have a lot of things happening. But you're right. No matter what we do, coming out of this, there's going to be a more junior side of the associate base that's going to have lost some opportunity in terms of side-by-side collaboration. With no matter how many collaboration tools we have, that the in-person whiteboarding, the side-by-side, that stuff is going to get lost, and it's something that we'll have to just deal with on the backside of it.
Yeah, Vinnie, I would just add to that. I think you're spot on. I think the biggest risk is around the onboarding of new associates and the things that we do that are, let's say, very high touch in the beginning of an associate's journey with us. I will say, though, kind of conversely, what we're also seeing is a different level of associate engagement that we didn't have before. I think we're really hypersensitive to the fact that people are managing work-life balance. People have kids at home and they have to homeschool, let's say. We have Teams meetings with our executives on a very frequent basis that wouldn't normally have been the case, right? We would have had town halls once a quarter, these sorts of things. And so I think that people, of course, are always concerned about associate engagement and associate well-being. And we always try to manage communication well in our organization, but we are kind of hypersensitive to burnout and hypersensitive to these things. And that's actually driven a higher level of associate engagement and strengthened our culture in many respects.
Right. Yeah.
Good.
And the only thing I guess I would add was that the engagement is actually really critical. It's kind of interesting because of the nature of our business. We typically, as I mentioned, kind of have our physicians and our nurses kind of centralized in acute care facilities, et cetera. And with this notion of remote work, really enabling workflows that enable it, that is open to the context of people providing inputs from remote areas, has really enabled us to expand out of our core markets, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, as it relates to the talent. So we now are able to embrace talent that lives out west and not force them to move, despite having great talent that we need that will add value to us, right? So as a result, we have positions that are on the West Coast, right? We have finance folks that live in New York, as an example, or we have patient experience people that live down in Tampa, right? So that was not a model that was, I think, central to how we embraced and pursued talent in the past, but we already had been kind of walking down that road at kind of expanding our reach. And I would say that we greatly accelerated it in this last 3 or 4 months as a result. So that's one thing that we've learned even outside of the norm.
Yeah, looking through the comments, and for those on the chat, I apologize, I haven't got to all your questions. There's a separate Q&A window that I was focusing the questions on, but I was reviewing the chat, Eric, while you were finishing up that thought. And there's a couple questions here about, again, and it goes to the point of winning on the curve or winning in the curves, that your organizations are going to be taking digital transformation a step forward by way of necessity, right? And we talked about that earlier. How do you capitalize on that momentum? And what I'm thinking about from a very practical term is, I know the clients I have, they have boards that review the innovative ideas and they prioritize what they're going to make capital investments in and who they're going to bring in to support those initiatives. I would imagine to this point, you guys are in the reaction phase of hitting the hottest things first. Do you see, or has there been structural changes to how you evaluate tools, technologies, customer engagement? Arvy, I'll start with you.
So yes, there's been a shift in our focus from an innovation perspective. But given that we are mostly digital to begin with, the shifts are not the ones you would expect. I think other companies you would kind of maybe see more emphasis on digital. For us, it's been a little bit more around collaboration and tools that can really help with the new normal, as we're calling it. So a lot of application rationalization. How do we get teams of people that are working on similar things together, especially in this virtual setting, to collaborate more and come up with better things? So we're trying to do more with less in this time.
Great. Eric or Mike, comments on that?
In our case, I think we're looking to streamline our digital front door. And by that, I really mean there are several channels through which people gain access to us. Call centers, websites. In some cases, we actually have mobile applications that enable you to maintain your connection with your physician. You can go and look at your charts or lab results, et cetera, et cetera. We've actually focused on bringing those various channels through which they interact with us, making them much more uniform, much more functional, driving ease of use, a decent patient experience. And of course, the panacea is that kind of Amazon-like experience where in a few clicks, you can kind of get what you need and move on and have it not be fragmented across your channels. So we're focusing a lot of focus on our digital front door.
Gotcha. Mike, I've got a direct question for you here, and it's from Jim Polano, and I had to mention it because I thought it was hilarious. Jim, I don't know you, but I already think I like you. It says, important question for Mike, please explain the toilet paper shortage.
So I work in IT, not in the merchandising space, to be clear. I don't know much more than I think anyone on this call knows, other than obviously there was some pretty significant panic buying. And I would suggest that that industry is a pretty flat industry as far as not having a lot of spikes. So I think pretty quickly.
A follow-up question, if that happens again, are you a good person to know? I guess is the...
I will tell you I had difficulty finding toilet paper myself.
I know we're running a little short on time. We stop at 6 o'clock. Isn't that right, Kim?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so
you've got a whole 5 minutes. You can cover a lot in 5 minutes. Well,
there is an important topic that came up. I hope I'm pronouncing Eric's name correctly, A-A-R-I-K. And I don't know if there's a direct answer for you guys on this, but I do think it's a good observation. When we brought the topic up of how to engage employees, both from a mentoring standpoint and development standpoint, but as well from a corporate culture perspective. Eric pointed out that it could be much more difficult for people of diversity. So from a diversity and inclusion perspective, having a voice in this environment, having a voice virtually provides its own challenges. Is that, how do you guys started thinking about that? Is that something that will be part of your planning? Eric, we'll start with you.
So you said diversity and inclusion and kind of
how working remotely affects I'm sure all of you guys have diversity and inclusion programs.
Certainly.
On those as we are. Does the remote work environment provide any complications to those implementation of those plans? Providing opportunities for people. It could be more difficult given that there's less physical presence.
Well, so I mean, we actually have 2 diversity conferences every year. One of which has already been certainly canceled. We're likely to do it virtually, and I mean that was typically attended by several hundred people each year. Would be one example. All of our affinity groups that are associated with diversity, whether it be the women's group or the LGBT group or the men's leadership network, all of those are affinity groups that thrived on spending quality time together, both at the office and in various settings within the community, right? So that's clearly one of those things we're gonna have to think through. Diverse topics are, needless to say, given the world order as we're experiencing it today, it's never been more important for us to come up with new answers and figure out a different path to change that actually can be effective. So I'd say that's probably one of the biggest risks to shifting our business models too terribly that we'll definitely need to figure out.
Gotcha. Arvy, Mike, in the closing minutes, any follow-up on that?
Yeah, I would just say, I think we leaned in very heavily into diversity and inclusion through this, especially with everything that's going on in the world. So I actually chair the Asian Middle Eastern ERG for Ally. We're setting up a lot of conversations. The Black African American ERG is setting up a lot of let's talk about it sessions where we're bringing in associates to just talk about it and have their feelings heard, showing empathy. We're seeing great participation on the recent topics where, we've had close to half of our employee population be part of one or another let's talk about it session to just open up and have an honest conversation and bring your authentic self to work. And, we're also doing a lot of engagement stuff. Like, for example, for the AME ERG, we're doing like a trivia night tomorrow over Zoom. It's all about just finding new ways to engage and just to still stay connected to your community groups.
Thank you. Mike, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, for me, there's a bit of a consistent theme here, right, about who you are as an organization. I think that Arvy and Eric both talked about how this has been an area of focus for the organization for many, many years prior to COVID. And I think the same is true for our organization, right? I think what has maybe changed is we've even leaned into these areas even more, right, to recognize that people are going through a really challenging time. As I mentioned before, one of our core values is care. And that's not just meant to be on a poster, right? That's something to say during a challenging time such as this, how are we really caring for our associates? And whether that's the diversity programs that we have or whether that's something else, let's say, it's something that I think that we've learned that during a crisis like this, how do we really lean into these values and how do we lean into these programs?
Great. Well, we're right on the hour, so we hit that on the nose. Mike, Eric, Arvy, thank you so much for joining. I really enjoyed the conversation. I think it's very timely. I think as the comments have suggested, we could probably go into 3 or 4 different tangents and spend an hour on each of those going deeper. So thank you so much for sharing. Kim, thanks for having us. Aparra, thanks for having us sponsor. And I'll turn it back over to you.
We are so grateful for you for sponsoring this, NTT and CapTech. We just cannot thank you enough. And really, panelists, what a great conversation. We appreciate your insights, and I could tell from what everyone was chatting about, just so interested to hear what the feet on the ground are really experiencing in this is traumatic time from a lot of perspectives for us. So thank you for your time. And attendees, as I said, you're making it possible by being here, listening to these great thoughts. We're grateful that you took the time to be here. We would ask, you're going to get an email from us in just a moment, and it's going to have a link to a quick survey, 5 questions. And this is our first virtual CIO Insights. Like I said, I'm going to be blunt. We raise money with these things. So we're going forward with them, and we'd love to have you tell us, did this work? Was it valuable to you? Would you want to do it again? If we did it in person in September, would you come? You know, these are questions that we don't know how to answer and how to prepare for, to serve you as best we can, and to also serve our nonprofit population as best we can. So if you'll take just a second to finish that survey when you get it, we'd greatly appreciate it. Is there anything else that I'm forgetting, Adrian or Karis, that I should be saying? I have this funny feeling there's something I should be mentioning. I don't think so. So again, thank you, and everybody have a wonderful evening. CIOs and panelists, if you'd stay for just a little bit longer, and everybody else can have a great evening. Stay safe.
Good evening, guys.